we're just making sure we get everything set and ready for those. Yep, we are live again.
I'm going to sit.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just grab one from up there. All right, we want to thank everybody. We're excited that we had as many show up as they have, or stayed, I guess, as they have. Today's discussion, as a lead team and as the lead team chair, we've talked about this whole process for a while. And we understand that this process has been long, it's difficult, there's lots of questions. Even some of the questions that we had, we're trying to figure out how we go and what we do. And that's kind of what this is today, to kind of talk about more about what's going on, what our options are, and try to answer as many questions as we can to the best of our ability. So with that, we're going to start with a little bit of prayer to help us with our discernment, and then we'll move into just discussions. We are live streaming to Facebook and YouTube. I know Gary had asked that we do that because he and Brian wanted to make sure that they could be involved in this while they're in Florida right now on the mission meeting. And for any of our others who are out there that can't, I know Barb's at home as well, and she's been very thankful for that. And hopefully, when it comes time to a vote, she can get in so she can be here to vote, because that will be one of those things that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. But dear Lord, we thank you so very much for allowing us to be here, to be in your house, and to talk about the life of this church as we serve you. We appreciate all of the opportunities that you give us, the freedom that we have to be here gathered together. Help us that in everything we do, that we set you forth first, that you are our vision in anything that we do. We thank you for that blessing and for that opportunity. In your name we pray. Amen.
Are the cameras on?
Yeah, cameras are on. I have this wide from the center picture, from the center camera.
You're a little hot.
I'm a little hot. All right, and Max isn't here. I'll go do that real quick.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Anybody know any good jokes? I want to say that I turned mine off. There we go. Patty Snyder went down to South Webster to a regional meeting. Our district superintendent, Calvin, led that meeting, and Gary and I were with her. And so she's also going to be speaking today. If you have any questions for her, just feel at liberty to ask her. Do we have the extra microphone, John? Okay, you got it. Okay. Rick's got one too. Okay, so we invite your questions today. I know you want to talk about process. Probably at some point we'll do that. We also invite your thoughts today. If you have something you want to say about this whole process. There are a couple rules, though, that I want to lay down in this process, okay? Number one, we will listen with respect for all. Even if someone else's opinion does not agree with your opinion, we're not going to argue about that. Just realize that there's a difference here, and that's fine. Everyone's welcome to their own decision, their own opinion, and so forth. We're not going to have any clapping today. If somebody says something that you feel needs to be said and you want to clap, please refrain, because that kind of sets up sides, and we don't want to have sides in this. Just be aware, too, that you're all invited to share your thoughts today, ask your questions. But do realize too that under the guidelines of the United Methodist Church, if and when it comes to a vote, only those who are members on the rolls of the church will be allowed to vote. So tomorrow night, the church is not having a vote. Tomorrow night, the leadership team is making a decision to progress forward or not. And a lot of that decision will be based on what we learned from you today. So this is a gathering time of information to have an opportunity for questions and answers and so forth.
All right. So we know that a lot of the questions that we've heard is, well, this is all just about the gay thing. No. Doctrine is a very important thing, a very important part of this. It's like, well, this is the one that we hear about. And, well, it is the one that we hear about because right now they're one of the loudest voices. They're one of the loudest folks that are out there, and kind of like in the world around us, sometimes the loudest voice is what gets the attention, is what gets pushed forth. And it's like, well, they're allowed to be gay, and yes, they are. Even under the Methodist Church today, as it's voted for the last 50 years, it's not been an issue. There are guidelines. And that's part of what the concern is here. There are things that are going on in the Methodist Church, in the world that we're in right now, that have blown my mind. Things that have just made my mind, I mean, I can't fathom picking up the Bible, saying this is just a word written by men, and tossing it on the pulpit and saying it's just about that. And by our discipline, there should have been something said, and there was a refusal to even say anything to that bishop who did that. There was a pastor who has not even finished their probation, who has come out and was in drag up front. And it's like, your personal beliefs are those. Your personal life choices are those. But I believe that God has brought us to the point where we are supposed to speak for His word. And we've heard, and we talked about this morning, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. And we have. We've tried to be kind. We've tried to work together. For the last 50 years, the vote has been consistent in where it's been. And who is being pushed out are the folks who have had that vote, who have said, we want to be scripturally based. We want this church to be centered on what God has told us.
Now, John, when you say pushed out, clarify that, please.
Okay. In pushed out, what I mean is who is going to have to go if they want to keep the Christ-centered, worship, Bible-centered theology, the way that we talk, the way that we teach. The conservatives, or those who have been centered on the way Wesley has taught us, are the ones that are having to leave.
Clarify that.
Well, if they want to have control of their doctrine, to control of who's coming, because right now we have Pastor Rob. I think most folks have been very happy with the type of preaching that we have, and we would love to keep that. But right now we are at the whim of the bishop. Whatever the bishop says, whenever the bishop says, Pastor Rod can be taken away. This theology can be taken away. So we want you to understand that we love the church that we're in, the building that we're in. We love the people that are here around us. We were lucky to have folks come and become even closer members of our family today. And in that, we have had missions, we have had jobs that we have done in this community and how we've treated this community and what we work in this community, that doesn't change if we do decide to disaffiliate. That doesn't change. This property stays within the congregation. Now, say that we choose to vote and we vote not to disaffiliate. If we don't disaffiliate, but in 3 years or in 1 year, they say, hey, Rod, we need you to go to Portsmouth. Rod's got to go to Portsmouth. The pastor that they bring here, we can say, hey, we don't think it's going to be a great fit. Can we have somebody else? And just like another local church was told, no. Even though that pastor said, I don't think I'm going to be a good fit there. I'm not sure that that's the place for me. The bishop said, nope. You're going to go there. You're going to do this. So there is that lack of ability to control that destiny. And if at that point we're like, no, we don't like this, we want to go somewhere else, the likelihood of being able to maintain our buildings, to keep our buildings, it's still there, but that cost is going to be completely different, because right now, if we would disaffiliate, it's based on the formula that they have provided, and it's not based on the market value of our property or anything of that nature. It is on our apportionments and the pension of the pastor. And we figured out that it's less than $67,000. We're probably closer to the 48-ish, I think, is when we looked at it, when we figured things out. Maybe 50, right in that range, which is money that we do have available if need be, if we choose to do this.
Okay, let me speak to the other side of the coin for a second. You also need to be aware, even though there's a discussion about disaffiliation and leaving the United Methodist denomination and so forth, one of the things that keeps coming back to me from you, this is a very common thread in discussions that I've been having, is, well, I just don't want anything to change. Okay? I just don't want anything to change. And the reality of that is pretty simple. As John has been speaking about changes that are taking place in theology across the denomination, across the world, nothing does need to change. I mean, you can decide, and maybe you just lean that direction, and the leadership team will have to hear that voice from you, that you don't do anything. You just continue on, continuing on. You show up on Sunday, you do ministry and mission together. You just continue as it is right now. But I'm hearing, though, the background of that question has to do with, it's not about we care even if the denomination changes. It's about, I want to stay in ministry with my friends and family. I've been here since I was a little child. I want to remain here. I like this building. I love this community. I want to continue to minister Christ in the community. Okay, so if you do not disaffiliate in any way, shape, or form, you just decide no, then you'll remain as a United Methodist Church. You'll just continue on. Some people may choose to leave. Some may come in because of it. Who knows? No one knows. By the way, I left my crystal ball at home today, so I can't help you with that. But I can say this, that as a congregation in this disaffiliation process, the process that is before us, and I have the information right here in front of me to help you understand that process. What doesn't change is your church family, other than those who may choose to leave on their own, and they have that right. What doesn't change is your meals on first and third Wednesdays, Cub Scouts meeting, your ministry in the community, decorating a tree down at Christmas time in the park. All of that does not change. This building that you're conveniently used to and you love so dearly, it won't change. Nobody's going to come in and remove the building. So bear that in mind, that not disaffiliating doesn't change anything physically or relationally, but disaffiliating also does not change anything physically or relationally with each other and the community. What's going to happen primarily is the name over the door will change, and all of the theology, this centrist and liberal theology that is increasing in speed and degree, will become more prominent within the life of the denomination as a whole. John made the comment that, the traditionalists are the ones that are having to leave. That's a choice. They don't have to leave. They're choosing to leave because they do not appreciate, number one, the agenda, the homosexual agenda that has infiltrated the denomination, the theology that is being changed and rewritten from a traditionalist, conservative kind of view to one that's more liberal oriented and godless, really, in my opinion. It's my words, not somebody else's. And the other thing that's happening right now is the folk who have spent 50 years trying to get the church to own up to what it says it will live by, the book of discipline, are just plain tired of fighting that battle, because our leadership in the denomination right now, overall, not completely all, but a majority of the leadership in the denomination right now, bishops on down, have determined that they're rewriting history themselves by refusing to do what the book of discipline says. So, in this process, yes, you're leaving the denomination if you disaffiliate, but no, you're not leaving your ministry, your building, your church family. And if you choose not to disaffiliate, then no, you're not leaving your church building, your church family, and your church ministry. So either way, it's a matter of you're still going to be here. And the congregation does have the means to meet the criteria that is allowed. Under the paragraph 2553 that was written in a special general conference in 2019, a denomination or a congregation has the ability to disaffiliate for theological and other reasons. And by doing so, the congregation does not need to pay for their property. They only need to pay apportionments for 2 years, the current year and the next. And they have to pay the portion of pension that goes to those pastors that were pre-1968, and there's still some out there. So that's what this is about. And either way you go, you're going to still be here on Sunday mornings, probably be online, worshiping, and sharing that ministry with anyone around the world who wants to tune in. So just understand that difference. I hope that, does anybody have any questions about that? Is that pretty clear?
Okay, and kind of, go ahead.
I thought there was a third voice, like the other one or something like that.
All
Okay,
right.
well, actually, I was getting ready to hit that. That was exactly what I was going to talk about. So she wanted to know about
yeah, go ahead.
a third, was there a third choice about going? Now that was what we were going to hit, because we've heard of the Global Methodist Church, which is one of the things that has started, was the Global Methodist Church. And that started May 1, and that's kind of accelerated this whole process. Now, with that, if we decide to disaffiliate, the work will be front-loaded, as we were talking about earlier. We'll have things that we'll have to decide. What are we going to do? Do we want to go to the Global Methodist Church that it tends to be a conservative, Wesleyan-bound denomination?
Let me speak to that just a second. The Wesleyan Covenant Association, which is a body of the church separate from the church, but made up of people from the church. It's like a caucus. They've been in existence for a number of years, trying desperately to bring some sense of control to the liberalism that was spreading and to voice it. And they've been pretty successful, except in the last 5 years. And so they've developed this group of people from around the world, literally around the world. That's why they use the name global. They have come to a consensus that they're tired of fighting and they're just going to break off and go. So the Global Methodist Church launched its denomination on May 1 of last year. And as a result of that, lots of people have left the United Methodist Church and are headed that direction, pastors and laity together. Now they are just a fledgling denomination at this point. They're still working out all the kinks. And as Greg Stover mentioned that day he was here last year, there's still a lot of kinks to work out, but people are moving that direction. The misinformation that has been shared by both sides of the fence, whether you're Global Methodist or whether you're not, the misinformation is this: you have to make a decision. Well, the reality is, no, you don't. And here's the truth of the matter, okay? If this congregation disaffiliates, whether it be in June this year, then June 30th would be the last day that this congregation would be United Methodist. If it is in October of this year, December 31st is the last day that you would be United Methodist. And at that point, when that clock strikes past midnight, you are independent. Okay? You are technically 100% independent. Because you can't be Global Methodist until you're available to be Global Methodist. Okay? So regardless of the information that's out there, the reality is you can't leave the denomination until you're released. And that will be June 30 or December 31. And the moment it goes past that clock, you are independent. And the congregation will have the opportunity and the decision to make. Do we remain independent? Well, there's a lot of independent churches around here. Amen? Amen. And so, I mean, you could be independent. What's that entail? That entails producing a doctrine, a declaration of your beliefs, finding your own pastor, putting together your own pastoral salary package. You basically would rule yourselves. You don't have some denomination over you. You make your own decisions. There's another type of association called an association, where you find a group of other churches that are like-minded. You may join that group, and then that group would give you some help with oversight, but you're still independent on your own. Or you may choose a denomination. About the only denomination that you may have trouble getting into is the Catholic Church. You've already declared yourselves to be Protestants, so you probably have to stay somewhere in that area. But I mean, I'm just being facetious, but the idea is really you could become any denomination you would choose to become. And there's no rush. There is no rush. So if this congregation would choose to disaffiliate by vote, then you have time to figure all those kinks out. You don't have to take what somebody else is telling you to take. The Global Methodist Church wants new congregations. They're trying to build their denomination, and there's misinformation out there. that's not being presented by them directly, but by people who just don't understand. You don't have to be a third party immediately. Okay, does that help you?
Yes, I have another question.
Please.
So if it's,
Let me get the mic over to you.
Jim, that's not mine.
If you go to Global Methodist, do you still keep the church?
Yes.
You're going to keep the church either way. If you disaffiliate or do not disaffiliate. Okay? There is within this paragraph, 2553, which is short-lived, it ends at the end of this year. That's why there's all this rush. People are wondering, why are we rushing? Well, there's a clock on this thing. And so if you are choosing to leave the denomination, you do have a clock. And it's the end of December, which for us, according to our bishop, is going to be the middle of October. We have to have everything done in place. Or we can disaffiliate this June. We just have to go through the checklist of things. Here's our deadlines for getting things done this time. So anyway, yeah, there's time to make decisions. You don't have to do anything right away. Does that answer your question? Did I hit that?
Now, one thing with that, there's not supposed to be a deadline. We should have another opportunity before the end of this year. However, Georgia has decided to do differently. They have stopped all disaffiliations because, there's misinformation out there, so we can't allow people to do this until the general conference, which puts everybody outside of that window. Which means now instead of paying $45,000 to $65,000, well, the value of this property is $1.5 million. So until you pay us $1.5 million, you can't go, or you can get a loan.
Actually, it's 80%. According to the Book of Discipline, a church leaving has to pay at least 80% of the market value, and it could be held to a higher amount.
That's why that timeline is there, because, we've got a large set of lots here. We've got the nice house that's next door. When we look at that market value, where is that going to put us? So those are some of the things is, we've got church leaders who say, this is what we're doing. This is what our general conference has said. This is how long you have to do this. But then you've got conferences who are like, no, you don't get that opportunity. So that was one of the reasons why my push was, let's go ahead and vote. And if you want to stay, we stay. If you want to leave, we leave. Make that choice now, because I don't know if we're going to have that choice after June. Because if there is a large number that go in June, the Methodist Church is trying to stem the flood of those leaving, because it's money to them. It is monetary in a sense.
Yeah, let me add to that just a little bit. This paragraph 2553 that I'm talking about does have a deadline, and that is the end of this year, and then it drops off. Part of the misinformation that's being shared right now is, in 2024, there will be another avenue for disaffiliation. Not necessarily. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't happen. Maybe the guidelines for disaffiliation will become more strict, maybe they won't. There's really no way to tell that. If you think about what's happening in terms of the denomination as a whole, well, John's been to annual conference, and I started in 91 going to annual conference. When I started, any type of a homosexual agenda item that came before our conference was soundly defeated. The traditional theological voice was being heard. I'm serious. It was like 90 to 10%. Last year and a year before that, we had, again, items that came that have that agenda behind them. And In the last conference, we had 2 items. One was defeated and the other was passed. All right? The vote on the one that won was 49% nay to 51% yay. And the vote of the one that was approved was the same. 51 yay, 49 nay. That's how close the voting now is between a liberal and a traditional voice. Now, here's the caveat. We have lost in our conference alone 8% of the denominations of our membership. Across the country, it's now at 7%. That's just something I read this week. We are now at 7%, okay? Is 7% of a traditional voice important to voting on issues that theologically you would not agree with? Yes, Becky.
Okay, what do you consider the theological voice in terms of homosexual stuff? Like, what are they saying? Because, I mean, obviously we've heard many different things. So, from my understanding, what was being said was basically, oh, they're more than welcome to be in our church, but they just can't do anything. Like, they can't hold positions or can't, do things like that. So what is the theological?
That would be the traditional voice. That what you just said.
Can you tell me what that is? Like, an example. Like, what?
Sure.
Because I don't know.
Okay. Until a few years back, it was kind of a moot point for homosexuals to marry. And then something changed.
Quite a while now, but okay.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's been a while, but yeah, something changed, right? And at that point, the church's voice remained steadfast. And that is that a United Methodist minister would not marry same-sex individuals. Okay? That has since, the word and the authority of the Book of Discipline on that matter has now been diminished because of the integrity that has been lost. The bishops have said, well, even though the book says this, we're not going to stop you. So they're not holding true to the integrity. A lot of this issue is not so much about homosexuality, it's about maintaining the disciplines of the church according to their historical value over the years. And those values have changed.
How do we get a copy of the discipline of the church?
Well, there's probably one in the library, and I have one. You can actually get a copy online. You can find it online as well. You can buy it through Cokesbury. You can probably find it used online. The current Book of Discipline is the 2016 Book of Discipline. The 2020 should have been the next quadrennium, but COVID hit. And then, so the General Conference was canceled because of medical necessity. So the 2020 has not happened. It still hasn't happened, and now it's scheduled for 2024. And what's going to happen in 2024 is that the 2020 General Conference will be held. All right? And so here's where that matters and how it matters. If people have left the denomination who carried the traditional voice, if they've left, they can no longer be a voting member of the General Conference. So people who were elected to that position, if they've left, that voice is lost. If that happens enough time, it doesn't take a very big percentage to swing one way or the other, a vote. So it's a simple majority vote at General Conference.
And in regards to voting, one second, Joe, and I'll be right, I promise I'll come right to you. So I was there in 19, there while we were voting. I was able to serve as an usher, so I got to move around to different spots throughout the theater where we were. And when votes were going on, one, we should pick somebody who is there, who's a good person, who we know is capable to do things. There was this lady that said, "Oh, I know him. He's a really good guy. He works hard for our church. I want to make sure I vote for him." There were 4 ladies that were surrounding her, she was there with, and we can't vote for him because he's one of them. And I'm like, what? It's like, well, yeah, he's one of those conservatives. We can't vote for him. They badgered her so hard that she finally said, okay, and she changed her vote. Now, it's one of those things, people are driving wedges, not based on our ability, but based on they're one of them. And it's like, wait a minute. So with where we are, we still love one another. We still work with one another. They can still come and work with us in the church. They can't be serving elders, is where it is in the discipline.
That's what it says in the discipline.
And that's what it says in the discipline. That's not what has been recently. But we should still be able to work together. We should still love one another. And people are like, well, it's all good. Say again?
You qualify that love. You don't love everybody. You don't love everybody equally. If you're gay,
I
don't love the people.
I can love them, but it doesn't mean that I love what they do. I don't necessarily love that part of it, no. And that's my personal held belief. But I can still love them because we're all sinners. I don't think that there's anyone in this room that if I said, if you haven't sinned, please stand up. Not a single one of us is going to stand up. We all sin.
And they're all the same.
So,
right?
yeah.
They're all the same.
But
God can forgive. I'm one of those liberals. I'm sorry. I live in a county and in a state that is bullying me. And so I feel that you hear this person that's saying, oh, he's just the opposite of what I feel living in my town, in my area. There are so many people that have this closed-minded idea and that it's not just about gays. There's a whole lot.
And real quick, and I'm coming from this perspective. I don't mind them. I don't have an issue with those that believe that way. However, we have just come out of a thing in scouting that has been a very rough, tough fight that has destroyed scouting. Scouting has been annihilated by what has been going on. And we've had things that were going on for years that some people had hidden because they were put in a position where they could groom. And is anybody who's gay a groomer? No, not at all. And like I said, I've got friends who are openly gay. I've got friends who I love to death, and I don't care. That's their choice, and I love them. But there are folks out there that part of their agenda is to do whatever they want, with whomever they want, whenever they want. We've got people trying to change the age of consent to 12. We have got people that are out there in this world that are doing vile things to promote their agenda. That doesn't mean that that's everyone within the church. That's why I say there are some folks that, no, I could care less if they're here or not, but there are some that I love dearly. But if you want to harm children, no. Is that everyone is gay? Not at all. I've got friends who are gay who are very upset with where the world is going because of what some of the folks who are trying to promote. That's where that difference is. That's where that difference is. We can love one another. Jesus loved it. Who did he go and have dinner with? Who did he associate with? Tax collectors, sinners, all those folks, prostitutes. That's who he went with. That's who he went to take care of. That's who he went to talk to. Because they needed it. But he also cleared the temple because of what they were doing in the temple. He cleared that. He took the time to fashion a whip and to clear that temple because of what was happening. So understand, I don't want to be one of those folks selling doves or changing money in the temple when he comes back. And it's not because I hate others. For folks who want to harm kids, I have a major issue. But when it comes to loving folks who are within themselves, what was that?
No.
And it's not. And that's why we have, but what they are doing, what folks are doing, and whether they're gay or not, they're trying to put in place in scouting. We've got youth protection that's supposed to protect things. Now, they're sitting there changing things in scouting so that grooming procedures can be there. That's where some of our problems are. And that's happening not only in scouting, but it's happening in churches, it's happening in schools. We had a camp that said, oh, you know what? If you're gay, go ahead and come here. We won't tell your parents. We won't interact with them at all. And we had leaders who, whoa. I can't send my kids to do that because you're saying it's going to be a one-on-one thing. We're not allowed to do that. We're like, well, it's okay for this case. No. We have protection. We have safe sanctuaries here. We have things that we're supposed to do to protect not only children, but also seniors and things like that. That's the same things that we have to address. And we have a book of discipline that says, if you do these things, then there are sanctions. If you harm children, there are sanctions, right? Do we want to just throw that out the door?
That's the point.
Holding to that book of discipline is where I am drawing my line.
It becomes an issue of integrity to what we live, or what we agree upon as guidelines. And what we agree upon as guidelines is now much more blurred.
Are you looking to stay with the church, or are you, because right now I feel like you're talking on the same side.
That's a question that's been brought to me several times. If the church would disaffiliate, I would not be disaffiliating from the United Methodist Church.
Well, because you have so many years invested.
Beyond that, I have a calling. And that calling was very specific for me. Now, I can't speak to anybody else.
But
Okay.
if the United Methodist is what you were called to be,
Yes.
and perhaps they're saying that that has changed and it's morphed somehow, you're still going to go with that?
Yes. And here's why. Because I know that there'll be a lot of hurting people left behind. There'll be congregations rather, that will want a traditional voice and won't be able to necessarily get it. I was called to United Methodist Church, specifically, okay? I don't know how you believe about hearing God's voice, and that really doesn't matter to me because I know what I heard. God said, I call you this day into my service. When I asked God what he was calling me into, he said, I'm calling you to be in the United Methodist Church. So there's been some concern about me. Believe me on this, hear me on this, okay? This process doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm not promoting it one way or the other necessarily. I see some things coming down the road that could be that I don't like. But at the same time, until God tells me to leave the United Methodist Church, I can't. So for me, it's an integrity issue to my call. And that may sound backwards to what you're hearing from me, but I can't be the issue. And I'm trying to be very neutral in how I speak about all this.
Well, if you have neutral and leaving, then we don't have anybody to represent state or.
Anyone who desires to speak to that's welcome to speak to that even now.
Okay, oh, 1 second. I had said, I had promised Joe and I almost messed up. Sorry about that, Joe, thank you. And then we'll come to John.
I have just a comment. You guys keep talking. I know this is only my second time here. And to me, the Lord's telling me is come as you are. Give us your tired. Give us your weak. Right? Give us, right? He ain't telling us about who's right, who's wrong. It's his business, not our business is what we're supposed to be taking care of, right? I mean, that's just what I'm getting out of this. I'm sorry, but
Don't apologize.
that's what I see, what I'm seeing in this, that, you guys are arguing over a mute point that shouldn't be I'm sorry. You should be praying to God, and God should give you the answer, and you guys should already have the answer, is the way I believe it. I know I'm young at this, and I'm a baby, but that's what he's telling me to tell you guys, so that's what I'm saying. I'm being faithful and loyal to my Lord, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, that voice needs to be heard as well. That kind of speaks to what Debbie's speaking of in terms of why is this even an issue?
All right, John?
My question is, I have two questions. One's maybe not a question, but a suggestion. What is we have around 80 members, so how many people have to vote to disaffiliate?
So it is 2/3, and it's 2/3 who are here to vote. It has to be in person. They've been very clear. There's no Zoom voting, there's no proxy voting, nothing like that.
Yeah.
Every member of the church will receive a certified letter to say, hey, this is going on. You are invited to be here at this date to vote whenever we decide that vote's going to be. So that's one of those things. So they have to be in person. So if 10 people show up for the vote that day, it's 2/3 of the 10 people that show up. If all 80 show up,
82, 83
then
now.
it's 2/3 of the 83.
In my next question is, I know that Lily and I have to leave shortly. Could we go ahead and see if Patty's going to speak, can we hear?
Yeah, please, Patty.
Hold
Grab
on,
the
let's get you a
microphone.
mic real quick. We'll bring it around.
It's coming
Here
to
it
you.
comes.
I will just say that I attended the meeting down in South Webster, but first of all, I was completely, I had no idea about I knew what disaffiliation was, leaving the church. However, my understanding was completely opposite of what is taking place. I felt, okay, this is the United Methodist Church. I have been here forever, since birth, and what was being taught here was part of the United Methodist Church, and those that didn't agree with it were leaving. That's not the case. Those conservatives that were taught in this United Methodist Church and maintain that conservative thought are the ones leaving. So that, and I had read, I thought I was informed, I had read everything out there, but I was not informed. And so, so those that are leaving are the ones that believe in the conservative thoughts of the church. But also, if you disaffiliate, then you do not have the ability to go to conference and have your thoughts known. So if you disaffiliate, you disaffiliate, and then the doctrine, the United Methodist Church goes on as they think that they see fit. What I have trouble understanding is why you would disaffiliate without trying to get to conference to make your voices known and to act as the church here wants you to vote and wants things to go on. That's the difficulty that I have. Why leave? Why not, I guess, fight for your right to be heard among yourselves? And I know there's a timeline. I understand that the first time, and I know that Georgia has said nobody can disaffiliate, and that's a possibility. But to leave without even trying is the difficulty that I have. I have, as many here, want things to stay as they always have been. My great-grandfather helped build this church, was a founder of the church. My grandfather helped found the Kingsmen's Bible class downstairs. My parents were baptized here. I was baptized here, married here. My son, this church is all I've ever known. And I certainly don't want it to change. But I think that change is coming either way. If we disaffiliate, we're no longer the Hope United Methodist Church, which we all love and want to keep. But on the other hand, if you don't disaffiliate, things will change. So no matter what, there's going to be change. And as a church, we have to decide which change is that we want. I know that down at Portsmouth, the majority down there, it appeared to me, were all for disaffiliation. But again, and I'm trying to be as non-biased as I can be. I truly have friends. It's not a gay thing for me. I have friends. I have relatives that I love dearly. It's a matter of, do you want to be a part of the United Methodist Church and have the money and help from the United Methodist Church, or do you go on your own? And if you go on your own, there's going to be people not stay. And so I guess a question would be, is there monetary, is it even possible to be monetary solvent and not be part of the United Methodist Church? So that's questions everybody's going to have to think about. So.
Thank you, Pat. What did you learn primarily from that meeting? What was your take home?
My take home was, wow, I didn't know. I was completely opposite. I did not understand that those that are with the conservative founders of the United Methodist Church are the ones that are disaffiliating.
Okay, and Calvin, our district superintendent.
Mm-hmm. And I also learned that no, you don't have to do anything. We can stay just as we are, and but and do what the bishops and those above us say, but haven't we always done that? There's been many things happen here that I've not agreed with, but it was part of the discipline, and that's the way it was. So I think as in that respect, it's always been that way.
Okay. And what did Calvin call us, those of us that were in that meeting, what did Calvin call us to do?
We called us to pray about it.
Pray for revival.
Pray for revival. Pray for your thoughts and search your heart. And
Okay, so, and, yes, ma'am.
If we stay just like we are, is the bishop who says the Bible is written by men, is he still our bishop?
Well, that was not our bishop that said that. That was one in the Pacific Northwest. And the thing is who takes over after that bishop? What decisions come down? Again, we would not have any control in regards to that.
Yeah.
So voting not making a decision, not voting or anything, is making a decision that you're going to do whatever comes down the pipe. Voting to not disaffiliate is saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to take whatever comes down the pipe. Voting to disaffiliate is, okay, let's see, do we want to create a doctrine that says this is what we want. We want to love everyone. We want to take care of folks. We want to continue the missions that we have. What we would do is, in the beginning, we would be front-loaded in saying, this is what our doctrine is. This is what we're going to do to create a package to try to bring a pastor here that meets where we are, what we want to present. We would create a team to review those. There are different organizations and different abilities to get that out to pastors from across the country. We would do kind of like I have friends that are at the Albany Baptist Church. They're going through a thing right now to get an associate pastor that will become their senior pastor when their pastor retires in 3 or 4 years. So they're working through that process. And so they're going through that process right now. And we meet every Thursday for a fellowship, and they've kind of talked about that off and on and they've been in it for about a month and a half now, 2 months. So, and they've been going through and talking about some of those interviews and things about how they're trying to discern that process. So we would have that, and then with the salary caps, no, we wouldn't get that from the district or from the conference, but we would work within what we have available to do. We would incorporate, we would go through and do all that, so you would still have your tax exempt status and work that. Don't necessarily have to go to the Global Methodist. Like I said, you could be an independent. We could become Wesleyan. We could become whatever. I mean, we could look at what best fits the makeup of this church.
First of all, it may be a little difficult to find someone to come to this area. We do not have a huge calling in this area for ministers. But second, that was just, the other thing was, I find we are dealing with a lot of scare tactics. There's a person who put the Bible down and said, yeah, I don't have to deal with this. Or there's somebody who dressed in drag. That's a person. And we are going to disaffiliate. We're going to leave our home because a person and I agree, there's the liberal side of this is pushing back. They just want equal treatment for everybody. Race, creed, ethnicity, all of those things. And it's kind of coming down to scare tactics.
Well, it's, in my opinion, it's not scare tactics. These are things that have happened. The Book of Discipline says what should happen if somebody does this. and then ignoring that book of discipline. So it's one of those things that, I mean, there's other churches across the country. They've had pastors that have done things that are not right. And if that, I mean,
Happens here too.
say again?
Happens here too. Happens
Yeah,
everywhere.
from, I think somebody said it had happened here at one point where a pastor got married or had an affair with somebody and then left and got married to them and left. So we understand. I mean, it happens. But things were dealt with. So
If they send us a preacher that we didn't like, they can be fired. It's happened.
well, yeah.
Well, let me clarify that. Let's clarify that, okay? Her comment was that they send us a preacher that we don't like, they can be fired. In the United Methodist system of providing a pastor to a congregation, it's called the appointive system. And as John mentioned earlier, it is the bishop's will. That's what it's called. As the bishop's will. I am appointed here by the bishop's will. Now, the bishop has a cabinet made up of district superintendents and other people, some laity, that are on the cabinet to help advise and to help select. There's a lot of work that goes into that. There's a ton of prayer that goes into that. And so when a pastor is sent to a church, they have actually thought about it a time or two, okay? And I mean over and over and over. It's a big process. Whenever a pastor is appointed to a church, it sets off a chain reaction. For instance, I came to you from Belpre Heights United Methodist Church, okay? When I left, that left a vacancy in the pastoral care there, which then a pastor was appointed to take where I was at, take that charge, which left an appointment vacancy where that person was. And it is a really long train, okay? But a lot of care goes into that. There's a lot of thought that goes into that. And that's actually, to speak to a positive side, Debbie, that's part of the process that is, I think, good, is that there is a group of people who are trying to match up a pastor for a congregation. Now, does that always work? No, it doesn't always work. Speaking about you can fire them, no, you can't. You're not allowed to fire your pastor. You can request another change. It's still up to the bishop's will. And if the bishop says no, then you continue in a relationship with this pastor. Most of the bishops today will not move a pastor within the first year because they understand that there's a getting to know each other kind of timeline that's necessary. So they generally won't even entertain it the first year. Maybe the second they would entertain that. I know of a pastor, personally, he's a friend of mine, who was pastoring a church in Southern Ohio. And he was, I'll just say, from Northern Ohio. But his personality was not a Southern Ohio personality. Very dry. Very, very dry humor. He was a great guy, but he didn't preach the way they wanted him to preach. And so they asked for him to be moved in the first year. And the bishop said no. No, it was a bishop at that time that was overseeing our conference at that time. And the bishop said no. So the congregational leadership got together and they determined that they needed to take matters into their own hands. Now, how did they do it? They had a woman in the congregation raise a charge of sexual abuse against him. Now, what do you think that did to his career? An investigation was begun, and here's what happened. He was allowed to continue living in the parsonage until the investigation was completed. He was given his salary package until the investigation was completed. And they did not have anyone to fill their pulpit for nearly a year because of the investigation. And when it came out in the end, after the investigation was done, it was very thorough. He was in counseling. The woman was in counseling. But she also admitted that she had trumped up the charges in order to allow the church to get their way. Now, let's talk about a pro, okay? That system was a pro. In an independent circumstance, you wouldn't have that kind of authority and backup to support the pastor, to support the congregation and seeing that the investigation was done. You'd be on your own for that. So there is a pro. You do have a system that is set in place that, for the most part, works. The real heart of that depends on integrity. And when people start making their own decisions and deciding to do things in the way they think it ought to be done or they want it done, that breaks that integrity, which is happening within our denomination. See, really, for me, it's not a homosexual thing. It's an integrity issue. And then you ask me, well, why would you want to stay? Because that's where God called me. God wants me to stay in that position. Now, my age, I could actually retire. I could short retire right now. 2 more years, I'll be ready to retire. Probably will, as a matter of fact. And then I can still serve the church. As long as I keep my orders, I can serve the church in retirement. I may wait till I'm 70. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that. God's got a plan. I don't. But I do know that I'm still called to be part of the United Methodist Church. I'm not staying because I got pension involved. I'm fully vested. I'm not going to lose my pension. I'm fully vested. I'm not going to leave the church because I don't like what's happening across the country, because I don't. But nonetheless, I feel like there's people that's going to need to be ministered to and hear a truthful voice on the other end of it, gay or not. Because there will be a lot of people who will feel abused that are gay, and there will be a lot of people who will feel abused that are not gay. And there's going to be hurt.
In this church, there's going to be hurt, one way or the other.
One way or the other. There's already a sense of hurt starting to build within this congregation. And that's one of the things that I hope and pray that you don't allow to happen. That you don't get to where you're setting up camps that are opposite each other and having these little talks behind people's backs and all that. You've had that. You've done that. You've been there, done that. I mean, when I was appointed here, okay, I get a call from my district superintendent. Says, you're about to get a call from another district superintendent. I'm like, why in the world are they moving me? And then I had a conversation with the PPR chair at the time. And she was just telling me what was going on. But then I understood why I was being brought here. It was to bring peace, reconciliation, to bring some time to calm the waters. And let's get back to basics here. And the basics are Jesus Christ is Lord. Amen. And everything we do as Christians is to answer the call that He gives to us to make disciples of Jesus Christ. Either way you go, that's still the ministry. The mission statement of the United Methodist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Sounds a lot like the Great Great Commission. It is the Great Commission. Just reword it a little bit. And the church has a commission by Christ to make disciples for the church. And as Joe was saying earlier, this is the Lord's business. Now the question happens to be, do you want to take whatever comes down the road in terms of theological differences, personality differences, so forth and so on? Or do you want to have an opportunity to set your destiny and just follow God's lead in it, so forth and so on? I mean, it really is a perspective issue. I hope and pray, and I have been praying, that there will not be infighting that takes place within the life of this church. If someone chooses to disaffiliate, now this is an interesting point. We use this word now. It's a buzzword now, especially within United Methodism. It's just one of those words now. Any member of the United Methodist Church can disaffiliate at any time. Did you know that? All you got to do is say, see you later. Not going to be here anymore. I withdraw my membership. That can happen. And it does happen. And it's happened for years. Years and years and years. But at the same time, there are still people who want to join the United Methodist Church, who appreciate the ministries of the history of the church, that want to continue those kinds of ministries, and particularly the ministries within the life of the local church. Wednesday meals, there's no reason that needs to stop. Even if we change the name over the door, it doesn't need to stop. So the local ministries are supposed to be reaching out to local people. Our congregation is a local congregation planted by God. Your great-grandfather may have had a hand in it, but it's planted here by God. We are all sitting here right now because God has placed us in this place together. Our ministry is together.
Meant was many of us here, this is all we have known.
Yep.
We have grown up here. Many of you here taught me in Sunday school. This is what I feel is my home. And what you do with this home that God placed here, we have to think about.
It's we got as much time as you want to give. I can see some of you are starting to get a little antsy. If you have to go to the bathroom, just go. I mean, just do it. Here's the thing. Tomorrow night, the leadership team is going to meet a special meeting at 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
My mistake. Thank you, Bonnie. It was set for 6 o'clock, and I made the mistake. So 6 o'clock, the leadership team will make a decision to either move forward or not. Now, even if we move forward, even if the congregation would move forward, I keep saying we because I feel like I'm part of you, and I am part of you, but I'm still neutral in this, okay? I don't have a vote. It's not my vote. It's y'all's vote. I'm here to help you understand the process. I'm here to answer your questions best I'm able. I'm here to help you get information you need. And I do have the process. I don't think that's really a matter of discussion because you don't seem to be interested in that. But there is a timeline that has to be met. And whether we meet that timeline for June or whether we would meet it for October, it really doesn't, either way. I think part of the concern for the June one is what Georgia did in shutting down. If you read News online, you'll see that there is a movement across the country right now by some bishops to shut down the disaffiliation process altogether and let it expire. Our bishop is committed at least to this June, and he's already set a date for the fall in October. But if the Judicial Council rules that it's all out of order, those who have disaffiliated will remain disaffiliated. Those who are in the process may have their opportunity removed. So that's part of it. What are the things, let me ask you this, what are the things about the United Methodist Church that you like? Let's go ahead and get our voice from those here. What is it that you like?
I don't know that it's not again that specific right
Here comes a microphone.
What I've been thinking about this whole process is that everybody, all these people that are leaving, well, they're losing our voices, our conservative, our
Representation.
representation, and to honor the doctrine that we've followed all these years. You know, what responsibility do we have to stay the course? I heard John say that people were, you know, letting everything slide for years. But, you know, I just have that question. Either way, I'm going to be okay. But that is one problem, one thing that I've thought about a lot.
Anyone else? Please. That's why we're here.
I have two comments. First one's on, you said what I like. I liked hearing the way you guys welcomed me. You guys, when you come in, you act like I was family instantly. And to me, that, you know, wow, you know. I love that part of it, that you guys welcome me in like that. But then on the other, where you guys were talking about prayer, right? And you said you guys prayed hard. And I was just wondering, what did God tell you guys to do? Because ain't this God's will, not our will? Ain't we supposed to be doing what God wants instead of what we're supposed to? I'm just, you know, I'm new at this, and that's what he's telling me to ask you guys, so I'm going to ask you because I'm going to be a faithful servant to him.
It is important for us to do God's will.
Yeah, because didn't you say you guys prayed hard on this? And I
We've
know
been-
he answers prayers, because prayers changes everything.
Understanding God's will, though, seems to be a problem for many of us.
Oh.
It's hard for us to know that. We can read the Word, okay? We can say, here's what God's Word says, and we can do that. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we don't like what God's Word says.
Amen, yes.
And you won't. But to do that is also a matter of opinions that have to come together. For instance, I interpret it one way, you may interpret it another, she may interpret it another, and we get right down the road. Now, what is God's will? Well, I think it's this. Well, no, it's not that, it's this. And what ends up happening at that point? Conflict.
I fear when-
Conflict.
If we do this affiliate,
That's kind of a fear too, is that who exactly is going to be in charge? Who is the person that's going to decide this new doctrine, this new, I mean, you have everything to start, begin at the beginning. It's an enormous task.
It is going to be an enormous task, and it's going to be one of these things that, one, we've got a lead team, but we need more people to step up. We've still got positions that aren't filled, and that we have asked for months and months and months to say, hey, we need help with this, we need help with this, we need people to fill this spot. But yeah, we have to generate that. The lead team is going to be part of that process. We need others to step up and be part of that process as well. It's not going to be simple, but it's not something that can't be done. We know what's there in the book of discipline. Part of that is what can we copy and paste and use and generate that is beneficial. But what's there? Now, a lot of the book of discipline, that's like, hey, there's nothing wrong with this. This is how we've lived. This is part of what we like. We like that we have this process. Again, that's where part of the problem is part of it is being just, this is the discipline, but we don't care what it says. And that has been very, very evident. We got one here, and then we'll come right to you.
In terms of your question of what you like or love about the Methodist Church, I'm not one who is from Wellston or raised in this church or anything like that. My children have been raised in this church. I
I understand where everybody is coming from when they say they don't want things to change, because coming here, becoming a member of this church, I didn't become a member because it was a Methodist church. I was raised Episcopalian. I teach at a Catholic school. I worked at a Jewish community center growing up. Like, I've been to other places and other experiences. John was somewhat raised Catholic. That was, his family didn't attend church regularly together, but John attended church. He's also attended other churches. When Jamie was a toddler, that's when I felt it was important for us to find a home church, somewhere where we could go and raise our children. And John agreed. And so what we did was we went to a variety of churches in the area to see what felt right. And when we came here, just like what Joe said, he felt welcomed and he felt a part of the family and all of that. And when we did, it just so happened that it was across the street from our house, but we went to many other churches too, and denominations and all of that. And we both, after attending here, we both felt comfortable and felt included and all of that. So I may be wrong, but my guess is the majority of the congregation does not know what the doctrine says. We can't quote the doctrine. We don't know what all the things are that are in there. And I'm one who strongly believes that there is no one correct religion, that all of them are right, as long as they have God and, at the top of it, then they are. So I guess that's what bothers me about all of this, and the way things are being said, because it does feel very much like we're being pushed in one direction, to disaffiliate, because the Methodist Church is doing all of these things that we don't want it to do as Methodists. But I'm not looking at it as a Methodist, I guess, and maybe I should. Maybe that's wrong in voting for me to not look at it that way. But I feel like there are several other people, at least in here, that kind of are on that same path, that same bandwagon. And a lot of the people, I feel, just from what I've heard and gathered, is that they don't want to lose their sense of this church. Not necessarily the Methodist Church, but Hope United Methodist Church. Like, that's what they're wanting. And I don't think either way, it's going to be the same church. I don't think it's going to be the same church and the same family and the same relationship. It just won't, because we're going to lose people either way. People are going to go. I mean, it's not like we haven't seen it with each pastor before us. People leave because of what's happening within the church. So I don't think that's realistic to tell us that it's not going to affect our family and our community, because it definitely is. I don't know. I mean, I just...
Thank
I don't
you.
know.
Thank you. Cindy down
Over here.
here, Jim.
Yep. Yep, he's coming around.
See you later, Jim.
Take care, Joe.
Don't eat all those cookies in one time.
I just, from what I'm hearing, I just need to know the process for tomorrow night. I don't know how many people's on the leadership team, whether there's 5 or 25, but it sounds like that group is going to decide disaffiliation or not, and then it will come to the general
No.
No.
So
Members?
what we will vote is, are we going to move forward with a disaffiliation vote for June 30th? Now, even if we vote to say, yes, we are going to have a disaffiliation vote, we will have a charge conference here in the church. All the members will be invited. Everyone can come and vote. At that time, we decide yay or nay. Or if we decide that we're going to do it and we want to get more, try to get more speakers. Well, I've put out multiple emails and they're not returning calls, they're not returning emails now. Not sure why, but from both sides, that were saying, hey, can you send us speakers? Crickets. But we're either going to vote in June or vote for the for the June process or the October process. When we do this,
Or we may vote not to do it all.
So, but what's going to happen is, if we say we are going to go to a disaffiliation vote for the June process, by March 15th, we'll tell the district superintendent, hey, we want to go ahead and schedule something. He will schedule something 4 or 5 weeks out, because it's how long it's going to take to get those things planned. Then we have to send the letters out, make sure everybody, we only have to do it 2 ways, and we're going to do our best to do more than 2. We're going to try to do email. We're going to try to do the telephone calls. We're going to try to do we will do the certified letters. We're going to do it on our social media. We're going to do our best to make sure that it's out there. Just like when you go to our Facebook page, those videos are still pinned at the top for choices, so that you can watch and see either way. But what we'll do is we will vote on, or when are we going to vote? It's still going to be up to the congregation. Even if we say, hey, we're voting for the June process, it'll still be, all right, yay or nay. And the church may vote, yes, we want to disaffiliate, or it may say, no, we don't want to disaffiliate. That will be the church's determination at that point. And again, it is of members who are here that day to vote.
Yeah, and that was made very clear to us at the meeting we were at in South Webster. Calvin, I wrote it down as he said it. Number one, anytime it's a charge conference vote, it's members only. Okay, just members. And we have now 83, or I think it's 83 now, today. So those members will all be contacted. Now, whether they choose to come to the meeting or not will be their decision. However, he made it very clear. Standard charge conference voting per Book of Discipline applies. No proxy, no Zoom-in voting, no mail-in voting. Have to be present. Now, here's what the Book of Discipline 2016 and prior says. Those who show up for a duly called charge conference meeting, whatever its purpose, okay? Just, if it's, if you were going to build a building, we'd have a charge conference. Those who show up to a duly authorized, advertised meeting constitute the quorum. So if you've got 83 members, you don't have to have 40 of them show up. If 4 people show up and 3 people vote, it's done. Now I had personally, as pastor, I had a charge conference to where 1 member of the congregation showed up for the charge conference. Now we would think that that would be a no-brainer. You just wouldn't have it, right? According to the Book of Discipline, we had our charge conference. And he voted. He made motion. It was seconded by him. It was voted on by him. I had no vote. And so what the issue was the district superintendent, it was the first year that they were doing regional charge conferences within our area. And the leaders of the church were just so angry that he wouldn't come to their church. Well, bless God, they're not going to go to where they're going to have this meeting. And the one guy that came called them all a bunch of babies for acting that way. Well, the next Sunday, after the regional meeting, Frank was this guy's name. I said, I just want to say thank you to Frank for coming to the charge conference meeting and for giving me a $10,000 raise. Boy, were there a lot of faces. But the next year, guess what? Well, they never got it in the first place, but it was well attended the next year. So that is the case here. You may have relatives that are members of the church that say, I can't make it. And they don't have a vote if they don't make it. You may say, well, in this day and age of electronic capability, why can't we just Zoom it in? None of us have to show up. No, that's not the way it works. Well, then can they send a letter? A proxy? No, can't send a letter. Can't send a proxy.
Even people in nursing homes that view that, I mean, I just don't see it there. I mean,
Are bishops doing their business via Zoom? Are they meeting together, or are they being able to make decisions?
Both and. Yeah, both and. When the bishops are getting together, it's still both and. So some of our meetings for the conference are both and. People are showing up.
When you say both and, what do you mean?
In person or even Zoom. Okay. For instance, our district is.
One voiced concern about not being able to use technology and for our nursing home.
They changed the rules. It originally wasn't, but it was allowed.
Because our nursing home people are conservative, and so they don't give them.
I'm saying that according to what we've been told, and you were there, it's not there.
Yeah.
And Jim made a good point. Well, that just doesn't seem fair. Okay? See, this is part of the integrity piece. This is part of the integrity piece.
You guys,
that's what the discipline says. And we're doing this vote because the discipline's not being followed, then that's all we have to do. We have to follow the discipline.
Very much so.
But we're talking about two different meetings. We're talking about a charge conference, and the bishops' meetings are not charges.
No, they're not.
And they're not government.
No, and our district meetings are not charge conferences either. No, no.
But yes, I think it would be right if they had a vote.
Okay.
How many do we have in
So,
the
how many shut-ins do we have?
Yes.
I think, is it, what, 12, 14? Oh, we're down to five or six. Okay, I thought it was higher than that. 5 or 6, I guess.
5 or 6? I'll drive the fade in the night.
If you can get them, if they're physically capable.
I think they deserve the right.
I don't disagree with that.
For 30 or 40 years.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying if they're physically capable.
You're right.
Yeah.
And
They're welcome.
if they want to, I mean.
Holly wants me to share what the 2/3 is. It's what they call a supermajority. In a general charge conference, for instance, if you're voting to build a building, okay? If you're voting to elect leadership, which is your charge conference. We've been having church conferences since I arrived. I don't know what you did before, but a church conference allows anybody who's part of the congregation to come to the meeting, but only church members can vote. In a charge conference, only church members are the ones attending generally, okay? So, a 2/3 means that you have to have a 2/3 majority, at least, to pass what's being on the table, okay? So in this case of disaffiliation, there would have to be a 2/3 vote, 66.1% vote.
of the people who are there.
Yeah.
Of
Now,
the people
if-
who are present.
Right. If all 83 show up, 54.78 or 55 people would have to vote in favor of it. That's if all 83 show up. So just to kind of put that out there. So it's, I mean, it
But if
has to
10
be
people show up, 6,
7,
7,
because it has to be above, yeah, 66.6. So yeah.
61.
That night will make all the difference in the world.
Now, to answer the same background question here, has this made a difference across some of the congregations that have chosen to disaffiliate? And the answer is yes. There have been congregations where the people who were present made the decision to move forward for disaffiliation. And then word was sent out, and people who had not even attended in years came and voted against it and it was defeated. And so then they left. And they didn't come back the next week. So that can happen too. If the congregation chooses to go a direction and someone else comes in and says, well, you know what, I'm going to go in there and put my influence on it. And it may change that. That's part of it. Whoever is attending a duly called meeting is the quorum.
State again what the difference is if we choose to stay. Who gets to stay? Because you said there wouldn't be any difference. So
Well, I mean, people could on their own choose to leave and not come back. So if the church voted to stay, then people on their own could say, I'm going to go ahead and stay now until things change, and they could do that. Or they could say, you know what, I want to leave now, and they could leave now. We could vote to disaffiliate, and people could stay until things change that they don't like, or they could vote to disaffiliate. Either way, you can. So if we disaffiliate or not, it's a person's personal choice as to whether or not they come back or not. Just like we do on a daily, weekly basis. We've had folks who have been here and have been members and have left and never come back. We have some that are living in Pennsylvania, Northern Ohio, other places that are still members on our roll, but or some live here and just have decided to not come back. If the church, you mean if the church would disaffiliate? So, no, the congregation, so the church or our congregation would disaffiliate, and then we would go and become whatever we do.
Let's clarify that. It's a disaffiliation from the denomination. The ministry of the church will not change.
Stays the same.
The people in the church doesn't change. On the first Sunday in July, if a disaffiliation takes place, you're still going to have church. Wait a minute.
You wouldn't be United Methodist, but you could be, you could be Global Methodist, you could be an independent, you could be whatever the church or the congregation has decided as they've moved through that process. What was that? Yes.
Get her a mic. Get her a mic.
She just asked, she said, so those who are...
I want her to speak
Okay.
because she's been through this process already. And it's hard, isn't it? All right, let her speak.
Those who would disaffiliate stay here, who choose to vote to disaffiliate, take the church and everything the church owns, basically. So if you did not want to disaffiliate and you didn't vote in that way and you did not want to stay with the church, then you would leave with nothing, basically.
Yeah.
But also, I think it needs to be said about the discipline. We have our discipline, which we can work to change if we want to, working together. John Wesley said, let's agree to disagree. You know, we're loving Christians, we should be allowed to do that. The Global does not have a discipline yet. They are working on their discipline. They were only formed May 1st of last year. And if you compare the two disciplines, they have taken a lot of what United Methodist believes in for what they have completed so far, even as hiring a minister. That portion of Global's discipline states it just the same as United Methodist. You have you cannot be a professing member of the LGBTQ community, but they would still hire you if you were a member of that community. But if you're not a professing member, if you don't say, yes, I belong to this community, I don't like labels, but they use them, LGBTQ, then you could be hired. What I'm pointing out is the Global discipline is the same in that respect and a lot of other respects as the United Methodist. And they have not finished. Who knows what what their discipline is going to say when it's finished. We don't know. Wesleyan Covenant is working hard they formed Global, and it's going to be pretty much what Wesleyan Covenant says, as far as I can see. But if you sit down and compare the two, there's not a lot of changes so far. And United Methodists can work to change our discipline. And as far as the extremists we have in United Methodists, you'll have them in any denomination. We don't have to go along with them. Yeah, you talk about things the lady in California came up with in the pulpit. Well, you're going to have them in other denominations. That doesn't mean that we're going to go by what they say. You'll have extremists, and not everybody goes along with the discipline. But it is going to hurt a lot of people.
See you.
Here with Holly, and then we'll come back over to you.
I'm just going to try to clear. I understand. I think I understand what the confusion is that you guys may not be touching on that Martha's not, and a lot of people don't understand. Okay, so if we choose to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church, we would still stay in this building. We just wouldn't be Methodist anymore. So we would have to become some other denomination or whatever, or independent, whatever we choose. But if we vote to stay with the Methodist Church, you'll still stay in this church building. No one is going to make anybody leave either way. So we'll still be in this building, but the Methodist Church will retain ownership of the building. So down the road, if they change the rules and people say, oh, I don't want to be part of the Methodist Church anymore, they may jack up the price of our church buildings to a price that we probably couldn't afford. So then you'd be basically stuck with the Methodist denomination. So either way, for the immediate future, we would stay in this building. But it's just more looking toward the future. And then we would lose a lot of the support of the Methodist Church, which right now helps to pay our pastor's salary.
Brings you a pastor, provides you guidelines for how to operate.
Literally helps to pay.
Yeah.
If it does come to a vote, the side that has the majority keeps the church, correct?
Well, super majority, not just a majority. It's not 51%. It has to be a super majority.
2/3.
Yes.
Now, let's clarify that statement.
Right.
Please
That's
clarify what you mean.
What I mean, if the leadership team does say, okay, let's have a vote.
Okay, and that's all it would be, is
A
just
vote,
let's have a vote.
then the 2/3 majority, super majority, if the 2/3 vote to disaffiliate, those disaffiliating have the church. Is that correct?
But no one's going to be shoved out.
Right.
So
But people may
retains.
choose to leave. But the 2/3 majority, if they vote not to disaffiliate, it stays as it is, and those who want to leave that side can leave.
Yes.
All right, let me try to.
Is that
let me try to
correct?
clarify, because what you've said 3 times,
Now,
I've got checked in it
if I
every
have to
time.
say it 4 times, I might.
Well, let me reverberate it back, okay? If a vote is taken, if it comes to the point of a vote to disaffiliate or not, I mean, that could be the other side of the vote, right? You're saying that the majority would own the building.
Whoever voted, you either stay a Methodist or you disaffiliate.
Okay, there's where I have my problem. It's not the individuals, but it is the congregation as a whole.
It's the group. If they vote to disaffiliate, the
disaffiliation begins and they have the church. Yes, yes. If the congregation, the 2/3 vote not to disaffiliate, you stay Hope United Methodist Church.
That's correct. And the trust clause remains in place. This disaffiliation is about a release of the trust clause. Okay? But the congregation itself, it's not who voted for and
That's not what I meant. I hope everybody knew that.
Okay.
That was taken literally. The 2/3 that vote and have that majority decides, do we disaffiliate or do we not individuals. I can get mad and leave tomorrow, whether I'm disaffiliated or not disaffiliated.
It's true.
As an individual.
Sure, yes, okay. All right, I'm with you. I just wanted to clarify that it's not about ownership, it's about the congregation. If people choose to leave the vote didn't go their way, then yeah.
We all have that.
But it's still going to be the congregations left.
We all have that in us to decide what we want to do based on the vote.
Go ahead, Bonnie.
I'm just going to make an interesting comment, a comment. I have been in South Carolina for the last couple months. Many of the Methodist churches there, this issue isn't even a point of discussion. They aren't addressing it at all. It's as if it's not even happening. The congregations aren't giving any information, and they will just go through this and they will remain United Methodist. These are very conservative people for the most part. And the pastors are conservative and they're not addressing it with the congregations. I don't really know what to think about it, but it is interesting. It is happening. I don't know how many places it's happening in, but many churches aren't having these meetings. They're just letting, I guess, their faith in God to happen and go forward with it, everything as it is. I was surprised by that, but it is happening right now in many Methodist congregations.
I was asked as a pastor at Heights since 2019. So what do we need to do? What's going on? And I said, we don't need to do anything. Nothing's changed. And nothing had changed. Conference would eventually happen. Nothing had changed. There wasn't people leaving the church in droves. And so there's nothing changed. But on May 1st, everything changed because now there was an outlet opened up. And so people started leaving pretty quickly. And the process has changed. Just that opening of the Global Methodist Church has changed the dynamic. And as a result of that, a lot of conservative voices have left. There are many more, I'll just say liberal voices that may come in because of new opportunities for leadership. So who knows? I say I left my crystal ball at home, so I can't say. We need to conclude this time together. Has it been beneficial? Yes, Gene.
I just got one thing I want to add. If I can remember, is there any way we can take from the churches that don't want to disaffiliate to get together and legally force the bishop to adhere to the rules that have been set out for them?
No, there's not. That rule is already in place. We call it the Book of Discipline. And they're not doing it. And the Judicial Council, which is our governing judicial body, not governing, but they're the ones that make decisions on what's proper according to the book, they have not contradicted some of the activities that are taking place. Well, there are lawsuits happening in other parts of the country. Yeah. I don't think so. I think the machine is too big. Yeah. We don't have to vote. That's why I said earlier, we do not have to vote. We do not have to have a disaffiliation vote. If the consensus of the congregation is to do nothing, then the leadership team, as leaders, would be doing nothing. But there isn't a consensus to do nothing. In fact, we sent out a survey. Remember the survey we sent out? So how do we fix that? I'm serious. Right here. You'd be here on the next Sunday.
You stay the same as if you voted no for disaffiliation. So so not voting is the same as voting no for disaffiliation. That's the same thing. So that's where you are, because no vote is a vote of no. And you would stay. Yeah, you would stay until whatever changes, and it may not affect you, but so. Well. Hold on.
All right, say again.
1 second, let me get you the mic.
We're going to go another 2 minutes, then I'm going to pray, and then we're going to be gone, okay?
The church I just left, a lot of the people were convinced that they had to vote. It was, spread all through the congregation. We have to vote. The church does not have to vote. They do not have to vote if they as a whole decide they're not going to.
Right, and that's the key point right there. If there is a decision made to not address the issue in a vote, then nothing changes. Nobody votes. No, there's no reason to vote. However, if the decision is made to vote, okay,
right.
then you better show up to vote.
Right, absolutely.
For or against, because at that point, if only the people who want the change to be made comes, then that change is going to be made. So there would have to be a 2/3 no in order for it to stay the same. Now, if it is the will of the congregation, and I don't know where...
Actually, anything that... So actually, it is only a 33 and a half or whatever, 33 1/3 to stay the same.
But if they don't show up, because if you tell them that their their non-vote is a no, that's not accurate if there is a vote.
Right.
They have to show up to vote and say no in order to gain that.
But if you don't have a vote, you don't know if it's the majority to stay. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Yeah. It requires 2/3 to disaffiliate. It only requires a 1/3 to not disaffiliate.
You just made a very confusing statement.
So
It needs 2/3 to disaffiliate. It needs more than a third. You're going to have to have. You're going to have a majority. Yeah, and yes, and
no, it doesn't need to be a supermajority to not disaffiliate. Only to disaffiliate. To stay the same, it's 1/3 plus one vote. So that's all it takes.
Because then you have not achieved.
Right. Correct. So
if the vote was to not disaffiliate,
So,
Nope.
No, because
Once you don't have a super majority,
no, because the way it has to be a vote of disaffiliate. Like if you do the vote, it's a vote of disaffiliate, to disaffiliate or not. So if 10 people show up and only 6 vote to disaffiliate, it doesn't happen. It has to be that 7.
all right. This has been quite interesting. I hope that there's been some sense of, how do I want to say it, less confusion. I'm hoping that you now have less confusion about the issues. As we meet tomorrow night as a leadership team, I will not have a vote. I don't vote in leadership team unless there is a tie, but I don't vote typically. I'm not going to vote tomorrow night. The leadership team will be listening to what you've said today. And quite frankly, you're about 50-50 right now as it is. I mean, I don't think that anyone's really expressed a great desire to disaffiliate. It's been more of confusion about what happens if we do. So I don't know.
That's what it seems.
Yeah, that's what it seems like.
Anybody wants to shoot me a text, email, express your opinion, yay or nay, feel free to, because man, I know it's lots of
And I will be here for those who don't use email, don't use, aren't techy. If any, I will sit here for a while, if anybody wants to approach me and discuss their feelings on things.
Yeah, Patty's a member of the team.
So,
Jane and Lynn and
Bonnie,
and Jean. Yeah, Bonnie's the
Annette,
secretary.
myself.
7, right?
So,
Father, we thank you for allowing us to have this open time to discuss and ask questions and do our best to answer. Father, we ask that you would help us to think about what's been said, search your heart. We know, Lord, that our ministry together is your primary focus. How we best do that is what we're trying to discern. And Father, we pray that you will help us to share information, at least to the leaders of this church, that they may know your will through the will of those who speak to them, email them, text them, call them, or talk to them in person. So, Father, lead us out of here. Let us go home and get our meal, get our rest. And Lord, we just praise you for the worship we had today. We thank you for 2 new members of the congregation, and Nancy and Cindy. We thank you, Lord, for allowing us to share in your holy meal today. In Christ's name, amen. Okay, thank you all.
Don't forget also the baptismal water is here if you want to partake of that before you leave.
voting down to Yes.
They have joined the church by my brother or something.
She's dangerous.
It could be